Have you ever been accused of something so terrible, so unthinkable, that it felt like your entire world shattered in an instant? That's exactly what happened to me when my own father, the man who raised me, looked me in the eye and accused me of stealing from him, something I'd never dream of doing. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife, leaving me questioning everything I thought I knew about family, trust, and my own worth. I've spent months fighting to clear my name, drowning in anger, heartbreak, and a desperate need to prove I'm not the person he thinks I am. This isn't just a story about a false accusation. It's about the raw, messy struggle to rebuild a bond that might be broken forever. It's about the sleepless nights, the haunting memories, and a shocking truth I uncovered that changed how I see my dad and myself. Stick with me as I lay it all bare, every painful step of proving my innocence, every tear I've shed, and the lingering doubt that still gnaws at me. You won't believe the lengths I went to, or the secret I stumbled upon, and I'm still not sure if I've truly won back his trust, or if I ever will. I need your help to figure out what comes next. My name's Ethan, and I'm 29, living in Asheville, North Carolina, a quirky mountain town nestled in the Blue Ridge, where the air always smells faintly of pine and the streets are lined with artsy shops and breweries. I'm a freelance graphic designer, working from a small studio apartment downtown with a view of the misty peaks that loom over the city. Asheville's a place of creativity and community, with its vibrant murals and buskers playing banjo on every corner, but it's also where I felt the deepest loneliness of my life over the past year. I grew up just outside town in a modest cabin-style house, raised by my dad, Tom, after my mom left when I was barely old enough to remember her face. Dad was a gruff, no-nonsense mechanic, always tinkering with old cars in the garage, his hands stained with grease, but he was also my hero, teaching me how to fish in the Swananoa River, showing me how to change a tire, and cheering louder than anyone at my high school soccer games. I always thought we had an unbreakable bond, forged through years of just the two of us against the world. But last fall, everything changed when he accused me of stealing a hefty sum of cash, $5,000 he'd saved for a new engine for his vintage truck, from a lockbox in his garage. The accusation hit me like a punch to the gut, and I've been reeling ever since, trying to prove I'm not the thief he believes I am. The emotional conflict tore through me like a wildfire, a brutal mix of betrayal, anger, and a bone-deep sadness that I still can't shake. I remember the exact moment it happened, standing in Dad's cluttered garage, the smell of motor oil thick in the air, as he held up the empty lockbox and fixed me with a stare so cold it didn't even look like him. I felt my stomach drop, my heart pounding in my chest, as the weight of his suspicion settled over me. How could he think I'd do this? Me, his only son, the kid he'd raised to value honesty above all else? I'd spent my whole life trying to make him proud, taking odd jobs as a teenager to help with bills, even designing logos for his mechanic buddies for free just to build my portfolio. Sure, we'd had our disagreements, times I'd pushed back against his stubbornness or stayed out too late with friends, but I never thought he'd doubt my character like this. The anger came fast, a hot, bitter wave that made me want to scream, to demand how he could believe I'd betray him. But underneath it was a grief I couldn't name, a fear that I'd lost his respect forever, that maybe I'd never been enough in his eyes. Every time I thought about it, driving through Asheville's winding mountain roads with the radio off, I felt smaller, like I was shrinking under the weight of his distrust. Memories of Dad haunted me in the weeks that followed, each one a reminder of what I stood to lose, twisting the knife deeper as I grappled with his accusation. I'd sit on my apartment balcony, watching the fog roll over the mountains at dawn, and remember the summer I was 12, when we'd camp in the Pisgah National Forest, just the two of us, roasting marshmallows over a crackling fire while he told stories about his own dad, a man I'd never met. I thought about how he'd beam with pride when I landed my first big design client, slapping me on the back and saying, "That's my boy," in a way that made me feel invincible. I couldn't forget the harder times, either, when I was 17 and crashed his old Chevy after sneaking out, how he didn't yell, but just looked at me with this quiet disappointment that hurt worse than any lecture. Those memories made me ache for the dad I knew, but they also fueled my confusion. How could that same man now see me as a thief? Had I missed some crack in our relationship, some unspoken resentment he'd been carrying? I started replaying every interaction from the past few years, wondering if I'd done something to make him doubt me, if I'd been too distant since moving out, too wrapped up in my own life to notice he needed me. The resentment built slowly but steadily, a heavy stone in my chest as I navigated the fallout, feeling more isolated than I ever had in this town that used to feel like my sanctuary. I stopped dropping by Dad's house on weekends, something I used to do just to check in or share a beer on his porch while the crickets chirped. I couldn't face him, couldn't bear the way his eyes would narrow with suspicion, or worse, the way he'd avoid looking at me altogether. I'd walk through Pack Square in downtown Asheville, past the street artists and food trucks, and feel this bitter pang that I had no one to turn to. Dad had been my family, my only real family, and now that was gone. I started avoiding places tied to him, like the diner on Biltmore Avenue where we'd grab burgers after fishing trips, because every spot held a ghost of better times, and I couldn't handle the mix of nostalgia and pain. I'd lie awake in my apartment, the hum of the city outside my window, staring at the ceiling and wondering if he'd ever believe me, if I'd ever get back the father I thought I knew. I resented him for not trusting me, for not even asking for my side before deciding I was guilty, but I also resented myself for not pushing harder to stay close, for assuming our bond was unbreakable, for not seeing this coming. The unexpected twist came about a month after the accusation, and it turned everything I thought I knew upside down, adding a layer of complexity to my fight that I hadn't seen coming. I'd been digging into the situation on my own, desperate to clear my name, even if Dad wouldn't listen. I started by retracing my steps from the week the money went missing, piecing together where I'd been, working late on a client project, grabbing coffee at a local spot called Drippolator, nowhere near his garage. I even checked my bank records, paranoid that somehow I'd look guilty if I didn't have proof of every penny. But the real shock came when I decided to snoop around Dad's place while he was at work, something I'd never done before, driven by a gut feeling I couldn't ignore. I let myself in with the spare key I still had, the familiar creak of the cabin's floorboards under my feet, and started poking around the garage. Under a pile of old rags near his workbench, I found a crumpled receipt from a pawn shop dated the day after the money disappeared. It wasn't for much, just a few $100 for some tools, but the name on it wasn't Dad's. It was his old buddy, Ray, a guy who'd been around a lot lately, helping with car repairs, but always seeming a little off, with shifty eyes and a nervous laugh. My heart raced as I stood there, the cold metal of the garage tools around me, realizing Ray might have taken the cash, and Dad didn't even know. But why hadn't Dad suspected him? And worse, why was I the one he blamed so easily? That receipt changed everything, flooding me with a mix of hope and dread as I stood in the dim light of the garage, the smell of grease and dust thick around me. I felt a surge of vindication. Here was proof, or at least a lead, that I wasn't the thief. But it also broke my heart in a new way. Did Dad trust Ray, a guy he'd known for a few years, more than me, his own son? Or was he so blinded by his own fears, maybe about money or losing control, that he needed someone to blame, and I was the easiest target? I stuffed the receipt in my pocket, my hands shaking, and left before he got home, but I couldn't stop thinking about it as I drove back through Asheville's winding streets. The autumn leaves a blur of red and gold outside my window. This twist didn't clear my name yet. It just raised more questions, made me wonder what else I didn't know about Dad, about the pressures he might be under, about why he'd turned on me so fast. I felt a flicker of guilt for snooping, too, like I'd betrayed him in a small way, even if it was to save myself. But mostly, I felt this desperate need to confront Ray, to dig deeper, though I didn't know if I had the guts, or if it would even matter to Dad. That discovery lit a fire under me, pushing me to fight harder to prove my innocence, though the path was rougher than I'd ever imagined. I didn't go straight to Dad with the receipt. I knew he'd brush it off or get defensive, maybe even accuse me of planting it. Instead, I started small, tracking down Ray on my own. I found him at a dive bar on the edge of town, a grimy spot called the Rusty Anchor, nursing a beer in the dim light. I didn't confront him outright, just made small talk about cars and Dad, watching his face for any sign of guilt. He seemed twitchy, avoiding my eyes, and when I casually mentioned the pawn shop, he nearly choked on his drink. It wasn't proof, but it was enough to convince me he knew something. I spent the next few weeks gathering more evidence, digging through public records at the county clerk's office downtown, even talking to a few of Dad's other buddies who hinted Ray had a gambling problem, debts piling up. I'd sit in my apartment late at night, the glow of my laptop screen the only light, piecing together timelines and scribbling notes, feeling like a detective in some gritty movie, except this was my life, my family, on the line. Every step forward felt like a small victory, but it also drained me, made me question if I was doing this for me or for Dad, if proving my innocence would even fix what was broken between us. The process tested every bit of my resolve, forcing me to confront parts of myself I'd rather ignore, as I navigated this mess in a town that felt both familiar and foreign now. I'd drive up to the Blue Ridge Parkway on weekends, the mountain vistas stretching endlessly before me, trying to clear my head, but I'd end up obsessing over every detail. Ray's nervous tics, Dad's cold stare, the weight of that empty lockbox. I started doubting myself, wondering if I was crazy for pushing so hard, if maybe I should just walk away and let Dad think what he wanted. My work suffered, too. Clients noticed I was distracted, missing deadlines, and I'd stare at my design software, unable to focus, haunted by the fear that I'd lose everything, not just Dad, if I couldn't fix this. I thought about Mom sometimes, wondering if she'd left because of Dad's stubbornness, if she'd seen a side of him I was only now discovering. I'd sketch the mountains in my notebook, jagged lines of charcoal mirroring the chaos in my head, trying to process the anger, the hurt, the desperate hope that I could still salvage something with him. Asheville's beauty, the golden glow of fall, the murmur of the French Broad River, felt like a cruel contrast to my turmoil, a reminder of happier times I wasn't sure I'd ever get back. I finally confronted Ray, about 3 months after finding the receipt, in a tense, quiet moment that left me more shaken than I expected. I caught him outside the pawn shop on a chilly November afternoon, the air crisp with the promise of winter, and laid it all out. The receipt, the rumors of his debts, my suspicion. I didn't yell, just kept my voice low, steady, though my heart was hammering. He didn't admit to stealing the money outright, but he broke down, mumbling about being in a bad spot, about borrowing from friends, and how he'd meant to pay it back. It wasn't a full confession, but it was close enough, and I recorded the whole thing on my phone, just in case. I felt a rush of triumph, standing there on the cracked sidewalk with the mountains looming in the distance, but also a hollow ache. Ray was a mess, a man drowning in his own mistakes, and I almost pitied him. I took the recording to Dad that night, showing up at his cabin unannounced, the porch light casting long shadows as I handed him my phone. He listened in silence, his face unreadable, and when it was over, he just nodded, muttered something about handling Ray, and didn't say a word about me, about us. No apology, no relief, just a wall of silence that hurt almost as much as the accusation had. I left feeling like I'd won the battle, but lost something bigger, something I couldn't name. Reflecting on the past few months, as I sit here in my apartment with the distant hum of Asheville's nightlife outside, I'm still wrestling with what this all means, with who Dad is and who I am to him now. I think about the times we clashed, the way I'd storm off as a teenager when he'd lecture me about responsibility, and wonder if I'd been a better son. Would he have trusted me more? I remember the good, too. Him teaching me to drive on back roads, gravel crunching under the tires, or the way he'd slip me an extra $20 when I was broke in college, grumbling, but with a softness in his eyes. I think about my own shortcomings, times I didn't call enough after moving out, times I took his presence for granted, assuming he'd always be there, gruff but steady. And I think about Ray, about the desperation that drove him to steal, about how Dad's loyalty to a friend blinded him to me. I've started carrying a photo of us from a fishing trip years ago, tucked in my wallet, a reminder of what we were, though I don't know if we'll ever be that again. I want to believe I've reclaimed something, my innocence, my dignity, but I also wonder if I've lost Dad's faith forever, if this fight scarred us in a way that won't heal, and that thought keeps me up at night. I picture a future where things are mended, where Dad and I sit on his porch again, sharing a beer as the sun sets over the mountains, talking about nothing and everything like we used to. I imagine working on a car together in his garage, the smell of oil and metal between us, rebuilding not just an engine, but our trust, piece by piece. But I also see a future where we're strangers, where I pass his house on my drives and feel that old sting, where we never bridge this gap. I wonder if I'll ever confront him about why he doubted me so easily, if I'll ask about the pressures he's hiding, or if I'll let it lie, afraid of what I might learn. Asheville stretches out beyond my window, its lights twinkling in the dark, and I feel the pull of its rugged beauty, its quiet strength, urging me to keep trying. But I'm not sure if I have the energy, or if he does. I'm sharing this story with you because I'm still searching for answers, still trying to figure out how to rebuild with Dad when the foundation feels so cracked. Have you ever been accused of something you didn't do, especially by someone you love, and felt that sting of distrust? How did you handle it? Did you fight to prove yourself like I did, or did you find a way to let go and move forward? Maybe you've had to rebuild a broken family bond after a betrayal. How did you start? And did the hurt ever truly fade? I'd love to hear your thoughts, your stories, because I believe we can learn from each other's pain. As I look ahead, I'm wondering if I'll ever feel that closeness with Dad again, if I can forgive him for doubting me, or if I'll always carry this weight of being seen as less than I am. What do you think? How do I find my way back to him from here?